Hey friend, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I'd like to highlight this game, Half-Life, on PlayStation 2 specifically. Before we discuss, I just wanted to say that if you like the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Your support of a small creator such as myself is very meaningful, it means a lot to me, so thanks in advance. I've been really wanting to play this game again recently because Half-Life really holds a special place in my heart. And I remember it as mostly a niche PC game, you know, watching my brother play this game, Half-Life, just kind of looked like another first-person shooter to me at 5 in 1999. You know, I didn't really know what it was, but I would eventually, some years later, get the opportunity to play through the game at a buddy's house, and took many fond memories from those nights of just running through Half-Life for the first time. And you know, now that I'm a bit older, you can play Half-Life in so many ways. There's Half-Life Source. There's the Black Mesa mod, which got a full supported release, which was pretty cool. Super up-resed 4K Half-Life, you know, that all really exists. But for me, I really wanted that good, that old school style of Half-Life. And while I didn't have a keyboard to play it with necessarily, I think that Half-Life on PlayStation 2 does a really great job of mimicking that experience of how it would have been in the early 2000s on PC. So that made me really excited to want to revisit it, but specifically do so on the PlayStation 2. Just to give you a little overview, you play as Gordon Freeman, and he's a theoretical physicist working at Black Mesa Research Facility. And while he's there, they're doing some scientific experiments that happen to go catastrophically wrong. I don't know how else to put it. And Freeman must really fight his way through the facility, which is overrun by alien creatures and military forces, all while uncovering this deeper mystery behind the incident that happened. The PlayStation 2 version of the game released November of 2001, with the original release on PC in 1998, also in November. And the developer, of course, was originally Valve. They kind of put the game together initially on PC, but actually the port itself was handled and developed by Gearbox Software. Which many people will know the names of nowadays, particularly for the Borderlands series. But at this time, I kind of knew Gearbox as the company that had made the Opposing Force expansion for Half-Life, or also worked on porting Pro Skater 3, or worked on porting the Halo series, or Brothers in Arms. So they really have an interesting track record in terms of where they started and who they are today. So I really just wanted to put this out in the zeitgeist. You know, say what you will about Gearbox and Randy Pitchford, who's he's had his interesting degree of controversies here and there, I won't deny that. But they really do have an impressive track record and interesting history as a company, so I do have a soft spot in my heart for Gearbox for those reasons. But there's also the legendary publisher behind this game, Sierra Studios, who is well known for developing adventure games and doing all sorts of publishing here and there. They were destroyed and equally resurrected by Blizzard Entertainment well after they were acquired, and they're known for so many classic PC games. You have Police Quest, King's Quest, Quest for Glory, Space Quest, and of course Gabriel Knight. Lots of questing going on in the Sierra Studios realm, but there's so many powerhouses at work to bring this iconic game to the floor between Valve, Gearbox, and Sierra, and so it was ripe for success. Something that maybe we didn't know as well in the early 2000s, late 90s, because these studios were still kind of cementing their legacy. But here looking back, we know for sure that this game was going to be iconic no matter what. And it's not just the studio names that bring success, but a lot of the people who are working at those studios at the time that propel this game into success. I think one of the people that I really have to call out is Mark Laidlaw, who helmed the entire narrative structure for the Half-Life series. He's a science fiction writer and helped really elevate many of the game's immersive storytelling aspects. So his influence is really felt throughout the game's environmental storytelling and many of the scripted sequences, of which for the time, these real-time scripted moments were a totally new concept that Valve was pioneering through Half-Life. And so that was really great that they brought in somebody who had a groundwork in kind of writing and building such worlds in such a genre. And not only was it Mark Laidlaw bringing his writing, but Gabe Newell bringing his fantastic vision and focus to the top of this game. Gabe and Valve at large went on to produce the excellent Steam platform, which for me, I still remember as like this little army green Windows 2001 looking UI that simply hosted 1.6 and Half-Life. And so to know where it is nowadays and see how far it's come, it's really cool to see what force Steam and Valve truly are in the world, and just to have kind of grown up alongside that. I take a lot of pride in knowing such fantastic games come from such a fantastic company, and kind of being there along the journey to see them develop into what they are nowadays. Now, I'll drop some development trivia in here, but I want to call out that if you want to truly learn about Half-Life, the series, its sequel Half-Life 2 as well, there are a few fantastic documentaries here on YouTube that Valve themselves produced that kind of walk through the history and development of the games. But I did want to call out just a couple little interesting things. One of those being that Half-Life was built on the Gold Source engine, which was essentially a modified version of Quake that they used to make the game. And Valve's goal here was to really try to, with those building blocks, create something that was going to break away from the whole shooting gallery style of first-person shooter games that were popular at the time, and kind of drive it more towards a story-driven and immersive experience. And they kind of built on that in the PlayStation 2 version, which of course they were able to enhance the visuals a little bit, having a couple years for Gearbox to come in and work on them. So a lot of the items got new HD character models and textures, and they also added in a whole new campaign called Half-Life Decay, which added split-screen multiplayer to the experience as well. And on top of that, there were a number of really cool development aspects happening in the background too. One of the ones I did want to call out was that AI of the time was not particularly sophisticated, right? So when Half-Life released, and the AI in this game was capable of taking cover, flanking, working in squads, which these aspects are things you'll see when you fight the military soldiers throughout the game, and these behaviors being so rare for 1998 video games, again, I just thought it was just so cool to know that playing this game, you're really experiencing a piece of the history of video game development, because it's a building block for so many of the things that we knew about video games for the decades to come. And of course, a game such as this still continues to influence what developers are doing nowadays. Needless to say, I could honestly talk about Half-Life and kind of its world and what it means to me for days and days, probably, if we sat down in a room together and just chatted about it on a sofa. But what I do want to do is move on to breaking down kind of the core aspects of the video game, share my thoughts on it having just replayed through it. And we'll start first kind of discussing the story at large. So from the moment that you load into a new game in Half-Life and you find yourself riding the train into Black Mesa, imagine it's 1998. It's going to be immediately evident to you how iconic this game is about to be and how it sets itself apart from its contemporaries of the time, just because this was not how first-person shooters were being done in such an era. And then as you work through the game, the 3D modeling of the test chamber and the dramatic opening of the Lambda complex doors, I think these moments are just so cool and innovative and dramatic for what was going on during that time in video game development. And even today, these sequences leave me in a really good state of awe. And just despite their old school presentation, I continue to be drawn in for that entire 5 to 6 minutes of train riding, waiting for the security guard to open the door, walking up to the complex doors. It just really feels like a whole thing. And if you play 1998 FPS games, I just don't think you get that experience quite in the way you do here. So the story itself really unfolds in a number of scripted events rather than cutscenes, something that you just didn't see again at the time. And this really does keep you immersed in the world overall, because you never end up leaving it. Whether you're in a cutscene or you're exploring the gameplay, you are there in the moment. Everything's rendered right in front of you for you to interact with and be a part of. And so while you're doing that, you're going to face alien threats and navigate military cover-ups and eventually enter this surreal world of Zen, this alien world which feels both creatively alien but also perfectly in universe for what Valve was going for over the course of this game. So thematically, we're getting a lot of things such as scientific hubris, isolation, survival that permeates in this experience that Valve has set up for us. And the storytelling is subtle but also effective and really lets the environment and the pacing kind of do most of the narrative lifting. And I really did like that for this game. I think that the style, the era, it just all really plays well into this whole just get out of Black Mesa. Like, you just don't really need another objective, and the objectives that you pick up along the way are kind of hurling you towards that ultimate outcome. And I did like that. And that goes to say, even though the game is linear, there's still good pacing and environmental storytelling that makes it feel quite dynamic as you're exploring the various areas that you'll go throughout Black Mesa. So yeah, you're not the one making the choices that affect the plot necessarily, but you're constantly engaged through exploration and combat in that adventure. And I will say that overall dialogue is minimal but functional. You know, NPCs deliver exposition and guidance, but the real storytelling comes from the world itself. And it's kind of got to, because when we think about a guy like Gordon Freeman, who's literally the figurehead of the silent protagonist in video games, starring here in his like main game, the original game, you know, you're gonna have to get a little bit of that. But I do enjoy the periodic moments that you come across where there's a security guard or scientist who shows up and gives you little guidance or tells you what needs to be done next to move on. Of course, right before you accidentally throw him into a head crab. Overall though, what I really want to get at in the story aspects of Half-Life is that the adventure of escaping Black Mesa is truly a fun one, and you get to learn so much about Black Mesa by exploring the facility and going throughout, picking up easily on how the government's reacting, how the scientists feel, what experiments have wrought upon Black Mesa and the world by all of this happening, and all without a cutscene or a significant exposition piece. It's really impressive then and enjoyable now that the environments just do such a strong performance in the sense of telling us what's going on in this world. And I just really appreciate it for that. They did a great job with the environmental storytelling in particular. The core gameplay loop really revolves around combat and exploration, and something that Valve is really good in particular at doing at, which is adding in little puzzle solving aspects to the game as well. Valve does a really great job of mixing these up. You know, one moment you're gonna be sneaking past some sound sensitive monsters in a silo. The next, maybe you're running over a giant enemy with a train. We get a little bit of everything here, and the objectives shift constantly, which really keeps the experience fresh when you're playing this game throughout. I'll say too that I found the gunplay to be tight and loud and exciting. However, there are occasional instances of screen tearing and slowdown, though they're not, you know, frequent enough to ruin the experiment or to be particularly notable. The game overall felt very well optimized, and I had a lot of fun with just chasing down enemies, or of course them chasing me down on occasions. And every time you fired a weapon, it just felt so good. I think that that's one thing that this game does right, is that even all these years later, when you fire off the assault rifle or whatever, it truly feels and sounds impressive and really keeps you moving throughout the course of the game. Navigation around the world is mostly straightforward, but you know, there are a couple train sections that happen mid-game that feel a little frustrating and sink up a lot of time in the mid-hump run, I guess. And this is mostly due to the pacing of kind of riding the train around slowly, making sure you hit the right areas in order to move on, and sometimes backtracking the train so that you can get to point A or point B. So it slows the pacing a lot compared to Gordon's blitz speed at which he moves. And in the PlayStation 2 version, he defaults to this super sprint, I guess. So when you kind of get stuck on these train sections, for me personally, it did kind of slow down the overall action. But kind of speaking in the realm of movement controls, I also wanted to say that these being tied to an analog stick is a little interesting, especially again on that train. You know, you're gonna have some mistakes where strafing or steering kind of come up along the way. And on a PC, these are much easier to mitigate because of the fact that you have dedicated keys, and there is a lack of in-between on these keys where you're gonna be combining them to move like up left, up right, or so on and so forth. Whereas the analog stick here presents some challenges in the way in which they had to translate that over to the confines of a PlayStation 2 controller. But they didn't really bother me too much. They were just things that kind of noted them along the way, like, oh, this is something happening, and maybe it's not as clean to control as it was on a PC. Another thing that really stands out to me is that the UI is quite clean. It's a little dated, of course. It's just your standard text and number boxes. But again, going back to the controls, weapon selection here is a little clunky on the PlayStation 2. You know, on the PC, when you're selecting weapons, you have a number of number keys that you'll use to choose various types of weapons and select them from there. But here, you're restricted to just using directional keys to go up or down and flip through the arsenal of guns that Gordon will have by the end. And so what tends to happen is I'm in a sequence where I need to switch a weapon, but now I'm going down, 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 you know, switch, or up, up, switch, down, switch, and or maybe messing it up a little bit along the way. So this does become a bit of a problem when you're in that heat of the moment. I would have liked to have seen some way for Valve to maybe have implemented a next weapon or previous weapon key, so that instead of me trying to find a specific weapon in an instance, I knew I could just press that, and then I'd have a new gun in my hands and I could begin to use that in a combat encounter. That would have definitely enhanced the flow of the gameplay and combat a little bit for me if they did something like that. There are a few other enhancements that we get in this PlayStation 2 version of the game. One of those that I thought was pretty interesting is that there's a unique feature to the PlayStation 2 version, which is an auto lock, which I thought was really interesting once I encountered it. So I will say that the way it works is pretty neat. You know, if you get your reticle on an enemy, you can then press this button to auto lock onto them. And then from there, you can move around the arena, you can strafe, so on and so forth, but Gordon will stay fixed on whatever enemy that is, even if they move too. So that was pretty nice, and it worked really well for these little head crabs. That the head crabs are definitely hard to hit on the PlayStation 2 version of the game, just normally, and they've always kind of been that way. But the auto lock gets more interesting when you then start to fight humanoid creatures like the Vortigaunt, or maybe you're fighting the military soldiers. When you auto lock on these folks, it auto locks almost all the time to their legs. And of course, you're not doing much damage if you're shooting at their legs and you're trying to end the encounter quickly. So it's a very thoughtful inclusion for controller-based play. You know, something that not too many years prior, I think it was that one of the Alien games on PlayStation 1 tried the whole modern style where you move with the left analog stick and then you look around with the right, and got critically panned for such a thing. So people were still trying to figure out like how to play first-person shooters on consoles. I just didn't know if this was exactly the right implementation. It works in some ways, in other ways it doesn't quite work as well. And I think nowadays we find that auto aim is just kind of a built-in functionality of shooting weapons when you're playing a game on FPS, and maybe that's a little better or not. I guess your mileage will vary how you feel about that. And another thing kind of in the auto world, like automatic things you do, auto equip is a thing also in the PlayStation 2 version of Half-Life. That is for sure a mess. There were a number of times where I didn't have any grenades in my arsenal, so when you run out of grenades and it's empty, when you pick one up, it's considered a new weapon and you automatically switch to it. And oftentimes you're gonna find these in crates and such. So I would hit a crate and then inside would be grenades, and I'd immediately equip the grenades, and here I am swinging my crowbar to break the crate, and then guess what happens? I throw the grenade. So then now I'm sprinting out of the area trying to get away from the crate before the grenade explodes. And this happened to me a number of times. So this was just something that I found to be a little disruptive to the gameplay flow overall. Could have been handled better. I would have preferred that there just be no auto equip at all, and maybe there is a way to disable that in the options. I don't remember taking a look, but this was something that for sure stood out to me because it happened a number of times and I just couldn't believe that. So I will say that while I walked away with a few technical notes in the gameplay department playing Half-Life, these do not distract from the exciting gameplay of the game. Again, you know, the action here is tight, it's well paced for the most part. The challenge is just very much perfect in the sense of the game really balances these moments of insta-death where you can fall off something, get crushed by something, etc., where these can occur at any difficulty. So whether you're playing it at easy, medium, or hard, the difficulty is going to adjust really based on the supplies you can find, the damage the enemies can give and take. And I did really appreciate that because you were always on edge no matter your style of play. And so it's a really fun journey. You know, no big issues to complain about for sure. Little technical items, but I found that on PlayStation 2, Half-Life overall played and felt pretty incredible. Okay, I want to talk about sound, and we're going to start by talking about the voice acting because while it is sparse, I find it to be incredibly effective. Again, Gordon doesn't speak, but the scientists and guards here deliver lines that help build the atmosphere and tension, really guide you a bit along the way. And the lines and the timbre of the actors is so iconic and so memorable. We really have two folks in particular to thank for that, and that's Michael Shapiro, who played G-Man and Barney and the security guards, and then Harry Robbins as well, who voices all of the scientists. And then there's other characters such as Kathy Levin and Kelly Bailey, who did some backup voice lines and some voice lines for the HEV suit and such. Their voices, the sound really creates the atmosphere of Half-Life and was carried into the sequels. And so they're legends. They are legendary voice actors, and they weren't even like traditional voice actors. You know, the studio just picked up collaborators or employees from Valve and asked them, hey, drop these voice lines for the game. And so the voice acting really has like a rawness to it as a result, which made playing it add to its like unsettled realism throughout the game that you're going to experience. And so for that, I think the voice lines just come to my mind. I can hear them as I'm talking about them, and I just really love that about the game. The voice acting is incredible for me. It's not like the best voice acting in the world, but it does exactly what it needs to do in the moment that it did it. So for that, I appreciate it. But also with the voice acting is fantastic sound effects that are punchy and memorable. Gunfire especially, and I've mentioned the assault rifle already, just punches everything out of existence when it's fired from an audio perspective. You can't hear anything going on in the room. And if you were in a mostly metal science laboratory in a hallway firing a weapon, that's exactly what it's going to be like. And I found myself at times needing to turn down the TV because I knew for sure I was just blasting that sound out of my house. So whether it's that or alien screeches or different environmental cues, they're all really well designed and tailored towards creating this immersive experience that is Half-Life. So overall, sound quality is solid, and here on the PlayStation 2, especially for this title, I'm just really impressed at the quality they were able to import from the PC to the PS2 when you're working with like minimal size and such and limitations that you need to be mindful of. So happy that they did that. It continues to build the immersion, and the only one thing I want to call out too is that the soundtrack here is minimal but impactful and really kicks in at key moments to heighten tension or excitement. And I love Half-Life music. There's just something really distinctive and different about it, but it gives me like really good ambient and like Aphex Twin vibes and things like that. I can vibe with all that. I love that kind of music. So yeah, another shout out just across the board. Sound here is excellently thoughtful and well designed. Just another big highlight of the game for me. Visually, not a whole lot to say. I just gotta say that by 2001 standards, Half-Life on PlayStation 2 looked great. It honestly did. The HD models and the facial animations were a step up from the original PC release, and it just honestly, I popped it in my PlayStation 2. It ran very smooth. It looked fantastic, and I had a blast with that. So the 3D environments specifically, like the test chamber and the Lambda complex, they're all really ahead of their time in terms of design. And I can understand that in 1998, this game would have blown you away if you installed it and played it on your PC. So let's kind of tailor more towards performance. I guess the game mostly holds up. There are frequent loading screens and occasional screen tearing, which can break the immersion. But for me personally, I don't mind these too much. That's why I didn't call them out. And that's because I grew up with this whole loading screen experience in all of these titles. You know, you'll in Half-Life 2 and its titles as well, you'll have these loading screens that pop in and load the new maps in a sequential way as you kind of complete chapters and such. Newer players might not have this history. Maybe computers now have gotten so powerful that you can just literally move into the next map because of how quickly it can load. So maybe that immersion breaking would be present for newer players. But for me, when I had an old hand-me-down PC from my dad and Half-Life 2, I wanted to play it, well, you did have to wait 20 seconds for the loading screen to pop up the new map so you can continue forward. And so that's just part of the nostalgia that I have for playing this game. It just wouldn't even feel right if that loading screen wasn't there, but it is something that I did have to call out because surely folks will have an experience where they see that and find it a little jarring. Not only do we have the base game, but I did also want to discuss Half-Life Decay as well in this review. I was originally going to play that campaign through and do its own video review and discuss the game at large, but we'll talk about it here briefly. I just want to say that having it exclusive on PlayStation 2, I really wanted to buy this game on PlayStation 2 so that I could specifically go and play that campaign. But I do gotta say that I was pretty let down by Half-Life Decay. Honestly, a big part of it is not the game campaign or the story or anything, but the difficulty of this add-on is just, it's insane. I guess apparently I tried to do some research on it, and the PlayStation 2 iteration is essentially glitched into its hardest difficulty or was intentionally designed to be that way. And there's no way in these mission-based structures to checkpoint or save, and sometimes these missions are like 30, 40 minutes or more. And so if you happen to fail, if one of the teammates dies, it's game over. You gotta replay that entire section again. And so unless both players are Half-Life experts or really great at first-person shooters, you are going to get owned. There's no supplies, there's barely any health, and it's really not much fun to play this solo because you have to switch back frequently between the characters. And so honestly, what was going to be my biggest highlight for getting the PlayStation 2 version became something that I quickly panned and moved on from. So that was kind of a huge bummer for me. If you're watching this, I would love to know what you thought if you've played Half-Life Decay, because it was not the experience that I was anticipating, and I wish that I had a like gaming friend who could pop over who was also pretty well versed in playing first-person shooters, because I couldn't get somebody that could help me get the campaign done in such a way, and we left more frustrated than we did having fun, and so ultimately I kind of put that to the side. Yeah, overall, just let me know what you thought about Half-Life Decay, but kind of returning to concluding thoughts on the base game, Half-Life on the PlayStation 2, it's a fascinating port and one of the most influential FPS games ever made. So while it does carry some technical baggage, you know, that clunky weapon selection, auto-equipping issues, some pacing hiccups, I really do think it delivers a smooth gaming experience with tight gunplay and a dynamic level design, much in line with what Half-Life would have been like if you played it in the early 2000s on a PC. And so there are so many fantastic ways to experience the story and the game, but I really wanted, again, that original experience of what Half-Life was when I was a kid and I played it. And here on the PlayStation 2, I thought I really got that, and I was very happy with that experience. So the addition of things like auto lock on, the split screen co-op, they're really thoughtful, and even if Decay's difficulty glitch makes it hard to enjoy, I think ultimately it's a nostalgic and technically impressive package, and the base game is a version of the classic that I did love, and despite its age, it still manages to leave me in awe. I think Half-Life is just one of those games that I can really feel its influence when I play other video games, and I think about it constantly when I play first-person shooters, from silent protagonists to the way the world is structured, scripted events that are not based on pre-rendered cutscenes. You know, all of these things Valve really pioneered here, and it's easy to look back and see why those things were so successful for creating immersion and inviting the player into the world and asking them not to leave. But in 1998, all of this was really brave to just try something different and do something that was not in line with, you know, the Quakes or the Unreal Tournaments or Doom or something like that. And so for Valve to step out on that line, I think they've been rewarded quite successfully to be one of the most influential gaming platforms and companies in this industry. And so just love this game. I love its legacy. I love the nostalgia I have for it. It's so fun to come back to, and it's a fantastic game that I really think everyone should play once, experience, to kind of understand one of the fundamental groundworks for modern gaming. It's really here. And the PlayStation 2 version that is, does a really fantastic job of presenting it in its original form. And so definitely check it out. If you have played the PlayStation 2 version or any version of Half-Life, like Black Mesa, I was thinking about playing Black Mesa, but I'd love to hear if you've played Black Mesa and what your thoughts were on it. Please share those in the comments below. And again, just wanted to say that if you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. It really means a lot to me. And otherwise, hope you stay well, stay healthy. I'll see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.